Millionaire thought his fiancée was perfect until his son chose someone else as Mom pictured this. A millionaire in his late 40s, sharp suit, champagne in hand, standing beside the woman he swears is his perfect match. She's radiant, every hair in place, her smile dazzling under the lights. The kind of woman who can silence a room just by walking in. He beams at her like she's the answer to every prayer he's ever whispered. And just a few feet away, his teenage son watches, silent, studying her, not with admiration, but with the kind of still, knowing gaze that says, asterisk, I already see what you're hiding. Asterisk, from the outside it looks like a fairy tale. A wealthy man finding love again after loss. A blended family waiting to happen. But fairy tales? They're not always what they seem, because this isn't just a story about romance. It's a story about loyalty, about the bond between a father and his son, about what happens when money blinds you to the truth standing right in front of you. You see, while the millionaire was busy convincing himself he'd found the perfect partner, his son was quietly collecting evidence. Not the kind you keep in folders or on hard drives. The kind that comes from sharp instincts, gut feelings, and the courage to look past a polished smile. He could have stayed silent. He could have swallowed his doubts and let his dad walk right into disaster. But instead, he made a choice, a bold, unexpected choice. He chose someone else, someone he believed deserved the title of mom far more than the flawless strangers standing in their living room. And that's where the cracks began to spread. Now, don't get me wrong, this story has all the juicy drama you'd expect. Whispered insults, shattered illusions, the kind of betrayal that makes your chest tighten just listening to it. But at its core, it's not petty. It's not about revenge for revenge's sake. It's about truth, quiet strength, and what it really means to protect the people you love, even when it costs you. So buckle up. Because what started as a sparkling love story will twist into something far darker, far more revealing. And by the end, you might just find yourself cheering for a teenager who refused to let his dad be fooled by a pretty mask. Oh, and before we dive in, a quick favor. If you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's chilled and plated with silver, please hit that subscribe button. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and recovering from the sheer secondhand rage that comes with reading them. So your support? It honestly means the world. All right, let's step into the story of a millionaire, his perfect fiancée, and the son who saw through it all. Let's start with him, the millionaire. Not the kind born into old money, lounging on family estates. No, this man built his empire from scratch. Late 40s now, sharp around the edges from years of grinding, but carrying himself with that quiet confidence you only earn. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and command it without saying much. Success had shaped him, but it hadn't hardened him. Because at the core, he was a father first. He'd lost his wife years back too soon, too suddenly. And after that, it was just him and his son. Two people navigating grief, growth, and everything in between. Their bond wasn't polished or perfect, but it was real. The kind where you can sit in silence and still feel understood. The kind where honesty wasn't optional, it was the rule. He poured his energy into raising that boy, made sure his son knew the value of hard work, the weight of integrity, and the importance of standing tall even when the world tried to knock you flat. In return, his son gave him loyalty and trust. For years it was just the two of them against the world, and it worked. But grief leaves gaps. And eventually, he wanted more than just business deals and father-son dinners. He wanted companionship again. That's when she appeared. The fiancée, she was everything people imagine when they picture perfect, elegant, polished, with the kind of poise that made strangers glance twice. She knew how to light up a room, how to shake hands with power, how to laugh just enough at the right moments. To everyone around them she was dazzling, and for him, she seemed like a second chance. The missing piece of a puzzle he thought was finally complete. But perfection is a tricky thing, because while the millionaire saw a partner, his son saw something else. At first he stayed quiet. He was polite, respectful. He tried to meet her halfway, to give her the chance his dad believed she deserved. But instincts are loud when you know how to listen. And his instincts whispered one thing. Asterisk, something doesn't add up. Asterisk, it wasn't obvious at first. Just tiny cracks in the glossy surface. A sharp glance when no one was watching. A dismissive tone that faded the second the millionaire walked into the room. The little ways she made conversations orbit around her, subtly nudging the boy to the background. To outsiders, she was flawless. To him, she was asterisk performing. Asterisk. He didn't call her out. Not yet. But he kept watching, measuring, waiting, because while everyone else was captivated by the perfect image she presented, he couldn't shake the feeling that behind the glamour was someone who didn't see them as family at all, just as a stepping stone to something bigger. And here's the thing. When a teenager sees through you, that's not luck. That's instinct sharpened by survival. So as his dad leaned further into this perfect life, smiling wider, laughing louder, convinced he'd finally found happiness again, the son carried a different truth in silence. For now, have you ever met someone who seemed too perfect, but your gut told you otherwise? At first, the son really did try. He was polite, careful, even a little hopeful. After all, his dad deserved happiness. If this woman could bring a spark back into his father's eyes, maybe she wasn't so bad. But it didn't take long for those tiny cracks to start showing. It began with comments so subtle, you could almost miss them. A backhanded joke about how young people these days didn't know anything. A dismissive smile when he shared an opinion about school or sports. Always light enough to play off as nothing, but sharp enough to sting. And every time his dad was near, her tone shifted, sweet, warm, like flipping a switch. One night at dinner, it became clear. The boy had been talking about a project he was proud of, something he'd worked hard on. She cut him off mid-sentence, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Oh, that's cute," she said, turning right back to his father. "Anyway, about the gala next week." It wasn't the words. It was the asterisk dismissal. Asterisk, he felt it. He saw it, and worse, his father didn't. The millionaire brushed it aside, too caught up in the glow of what he thought was love. To him, she was radiant. To his son, she was rewriting the rules of their home, and he was being pushed further into the margins. The wedge only grew sharper. Family movie nights, once their tradition, turned into showcases for her taste. If the son picked something, she'd laugh lightly and say, "Oh, darling," You wouldn't enjoy that. And his dad? He'd just nod, letting her choose. Conversation shifted, too. She positioned herself like the gatekeeper, answering for his father, speaking over him, deciding plans before he even knew about them. Slowly but surely, she wasn't just entering their world, she was rearranging it. And every time the boy tried to voice what he felt, the response was the same. His dad shrugging it off. She doesn't mean anything by it, his father would say. She's just adjusting. Give her time, but time didn't soften her edges. It sharpened them. One afternoon, the son overheard her on the phone. Her voice dipped low, but her words unmistakable. I can handle the kid. He's just there. Once we're married, he won't matter as much. That line hit him like a punch. Asterisk, he's just there. Asterisk, imagine hearing that in your own home. From the person who's supposed to be joining your family. He didn't confront her then. Instead, he carried the weight of it, unsure what to do. He wanted to protect his dad's happiness. He wanted to believe maybe she'd change. But how do you ignore the truth once you've heard it? Every gathering, every outing, the cracks widened. He saw the way she charmed his father's friends, laughing a little too loud, leaning in just enough to make them feel important. He watched her play perfect for the crowd, then snap the mask back into place the second the lights dimmed. It wasn't just that she dismissed him. It was the way she erased him, as if his existence was an inconvenience, something to tolerate until she could reshape the family into something more suitable for her. And still, his father clung to the illusion. The boy felt torn in half. Should he speak up? Risk breaking his father's heart? Risk sounding like the bitter kid who just didn't want change? Or should he stay silent? Let his dad keep believing in this perfect love story, even if it ended in disaster? That's the thing about loyalty. Sometimes it feels like a trap. You want to protect the people you love, but in doing so, you risk losing them. He stayed quiet. For now, he swallowed the frustration, the anger, the disbelief. But inside, something was shifting. He was keeping score, even if his dad wasn't, and he knew sooner or later that silence was going to break. Would you tell your parent if you thought their partner was bad news? Or stay quiet for their happiness? The breaking point didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, almost casually, on a warm evening that should have been unremarkable. The fiancé had invited a few friends over, glamorous women with engines and with expensive handbags and sharper tongues. They sipped wine on the patio, laughter spilling out like perfume, sweet on the surface, but cloying underneath. The son wasn't supposed to be listening, but when you live in a house that suddenly doesn't feel like yours anymore, eavesdropping becomes survival. He lingered near the doorway, out of sight when her voice cut through. Honestly, it's only a matter of time before everything's in my name. The house, the accounts, all of it. He's smitten. He'd sign the papers tomorrow if I asked. And the boy? Oh, he'll adjust. He doesn't really matter in the long run. Laughter followed. Cold. Complicit. The boy froze. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them. Casual. Certain. Like his father's life, their home, asterisk, his asterisk place in it, were all stepping stones on her climb to something bigger. And then the mockery. One of the women asked about him, the son. The fiancée rolled her eyes. He tries so hard to be mature. But really, he's just a kid desperate for attention. Sweet enough, I guess, but hardly impressive. Not like his father, the boy's hands clenched at his sides. Not impressive. Just a kid. An obstacle. For a moment he wanted to storm out, call her out in front of everyone, rip away the mask she wore so easily. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed still, listening, letting the words sink deep into the part of him that still wanted to believe his dad was right. That belief shattered that night, because in that laughter, in those cruel little words, he finally understood. She wasn't building a family. She was building an empire, one that didn't include him, except as baggage she'd eventually shove into the background. It hurt. Of course it did. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. A clarity he hadn't had before. This wasn't about his dad's happiness anymore. This was about survival. About protecting what was left of their family from someone who saw them as pawns in a game of status and wealth. He didn't march into the patio. He didn't confront her then and there. No, he made a quieter, sharper choice. He refused her. Not out loud, not yet. But in his mind and his heart he drew the line. She would never be Mom. She would never hold that place in his life, no matter how much his father adored her. And once he made that choice, everything shifted. He watched her differently now. Every smile was a performance, every touch a transaction. He noticed the way she leaned closer when wealthy friends visited, the way her voice sharpened whenever the talk drifted to money or travel or status symbols. It was never about them. It was always about what she could gain. One evening his father asked, half joking, "So what do you think of her?" "Think she'll make a good mom?" The son forced a smile. He wanted to scream the truth, but instead he just said, "She's different. A safe word, a holding pattern, but inside he knew the answer. She wasn't his mom. She never would be, and he wasn't going to let her rewrite their family without a fight. That night, as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the decision crystallized. He wouldn't stay silent forever. He wouldn't let his dad walk blindly into a life that erased everything they'd built together. And that's when he made a choice that would change everything. If you were the son, what would you have done in this moment? The confrontation didn't erupt in chaos. It unfolded like a slow burn, quiet, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Dinner was set like a picture from a glossy magazine. Crystal glasses, polished silverware, the fiancée's hand draped casually over the millionaire's arm as though she owned him already. She laughed too brightly at his stories, leaned too close, played the role with almost flawless precision. Almost. The boy sat across from them, silent. But silence can be louder than any shout, and his father noticed. "You've barely touched your food," the millionaire said, gentle but probing. "Something on your mind?" The fiancé chimed in before he could answer. "He's just moody. Teenagers, you know how they are." Her smile was sweet, her tone dismissive. That was it. The moment he stopped holding back, the boy lifted his head, his eyes steady. "Actually, yeah. There's something on my mind." The room shifted. Even the air seemed to still. His father leaned forward. "What is it?" The boy didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply spoke the truth. "I already know who my mom is. And it's not her." The fiancée froze. Her fork clattered softly against her plate. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice a touch too sharp for someone trying to play the doting stepmother. The boy held her gaze. "You want me to see you as family. But family doesn't treat people like obstacles. Family doesn't laugh about taking everything for themselves. Family doesn't fake it." Her smile faltered. For the first time the mask cracked. His father frowned, confused. "Where is this coming from?" The boy's voice softened. "Dad, I've watched her. The way she talks about you when you're not around. The way she talks about me. To her, we're not people. We're assets. Leverage." He swallowed hard. "Mom isn't someone who tries to replace what we had. Mom is the person who already loved us, even when she had nothing to gain." And then came the choice, the declaration. He turned, not toward the fiancé, but toward the truth he'd been holding on to. Maybe it was a family friend who'd been there since his mother passed, someone who cooked them meals when grief stole their appetite. Maybe it was his aunt, or even just the memory of his late mother, honored with quiet reverence. Whoever it was, he named them. Clearly, proudly. "That's my mom. And no one else can take that place." Silence. Heavy. Cutting Dot, the fiancé's mask, shattered completely then. Her carefully rehearsed sweetness curdled into something raw and sharp. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? What I deserve asterisk." Her voice rose, brittle with rage. The perfect image she'd crafted slipped like glass from a hand, shattering piece by piece until all that was left was entitlement and fury. The millionaire stared, stunned. For weeks, months even, he'd only seen what she wanted him to see. But now the cracks were undeniable. "Deserve?" he asked quietly. She tried to backtrack, to patch the mask back together, but it was too late. The sun had exposed the truth, not with anger, but with clarity, with love, because this wasn't about tearing her down, it was about lifting up what was real. The bond between father and son, the memory of a woman who truly cared, the quiet presence of someone who had already been Mom, whether in blood or in spirit. The millionaire sat back, his world tilting. He looked at his son, then at the woman beside him, and for the first time he saw the performance for what it was. The fiancé sputtered, "He's lying. He doesn't understand. He's just a child." But the boy didn't flinch. Double quotes, "No, I understand more than you think." And that was the end of her act. The truth had pierced through, sharp and unrelenting. There was no going back to the illusion she'd tried so hard to weave. Asterisk. Do you think he was right to call her out, or should he have stayed quiet? Asterisk. The dinner table had never felt so heavy. The millionaire sat frozen, his fork untouched, the echo of his son's words replaying like a broken record. For the first time in months, he wasn't seeing his fiancée's polished perfection. He was replaying all the little moments he'd brushed aside. The phone calls she'd always taken in private. The way she insisted on picking the restaurants, the trips, the outfits always centered around appearances. The subtle digs at his son, soft and jokes whenever he called her out. At the time, he'd told himself it was nothing. That she was adjusting. That love meant compromise. But now? It all looked different. His son's calm clarity had cut through the fog. The fiancé, though, wasn't going down quietly. "Are you really going to let him talk to me like that?" She snapped, her voice high, brittle. He's twisting things. You know me better than that, don't you? But her words didn't land the way they used to. The millionaire didn't rush to defend her. He just studied her, almost as if he was meeting her for the first time. The boy didn't need to add more. His silence was louder than anything she could say. And suddenly her performance began to unravel. It started small. Friends who had once praised her charm began to notice how often she interrupted, how she always redirected attention back to herself. At parties, she laughed a little too loudly, touched his arm a little too possessively, as though she was reminding everyone in the room, he's mine, family members. Two grew wary. They noticed how she never asked about the boys' school, his interests, his life. She wasn't building a home with them, she was staking a claim. The millionaire saw it now, clearer than ever. And with clarity came guilt. How had he missed this? How had he been so blinded? One evening, after another tense gathering where whispers lingered longer than the laughter, he finally asked her outright, "Were you ever in this for me? Or was it always about what I could give you?" Her reaction said more than her words ever could. She scoffed. "That's an insult. After everything I've done for you," but her tone wasn't wounded. It was defensive, sharp, laced with entitlement. She didn't say after everything we've shared, She said done for you, the difference cut deep. From that moment, the cracks widened. No matter how she tried to plaster them over with charm or grand gestures, the foundation was already crumbling. The millionaire began pulling back, financially, emotionally, physically. And with each step he took away, her mask slipped further. The son? He didn't gloat. He didn't have to. His quiet strength spoke for itself, because this wasn't about winning an argument. It was about truth finally catching up to lies. The fiancée tried one last tactic: tears. The kind meant for an audience, meant to sway sympathy. She clutched his arm, sobbing, whispering promises about change, about being misunderstood. But the millionaire had lived real love before. He knew what it sounded like, what it felt like. And this wasn't it. In the reflection of her glossy performance, he could see the outline of his late wife, the authenticity she'd carried, the sacrifices she'd made for family. And in his son he saw her spirit, living on the same honesty, the same refusal to let appearances win over truth. For the first time in months, he trusted his instincts again, and that trust led to the inevitable conclusion. This woman wasn't his partner. She was a parasite feeding on the life he'd built. So, when she finally snapped, when her frustration boiled over into accusations and bitter words, it wasn't a shock. It was confirmation. "You'll regret this," she spat. "You think anyone else will ever love you the way I did?" He looked at her, steady. "If this is your version of love, then I'd rather be alone." And that was it. The empire he'd built didn't crumble that night. The family bond didn't fracture. Instead, the illusion shattered, and what remained was stronger than before. A father and son, side by side, finally free of the performance. Who do you think saw the truth first? The son, the dad, or the fiancée herself? She didn't give up quietly. When charm failed and control slipped from her fingers, the fiancée pulled out her last card: remorse. Not real remorse, of course. The rehearsed kind. The kind soaked in crocodile tears and shaky hands clutching at sympathy. She showed up with flowers, with promises, with carefully chosen words. "I made mistakes," she whispered, eyes glistening just enough to catch the light. "But love isn't perfect. Don't throw us away over misunderstandings." The millionaire stood there, listening. For years he'd built his life on reading people, clients, competitors, employees. He'd always prided himself on knowing when someone was bluffing. But with her, he'd ignored every instinct. Now, watching her performance, he saw the truth written in bold letters. His son was there too. Quiet, steady, unwavering. He didn't argue, didn't lash out. He simply crossed his arms and met her gaze without flinching. That silence was powerful. It told his father everything words couldn't, because sometimes the loudest truth doesn't come from shouting, it comes from a quiet refusal to accept a lie. For a moment, the fiancée's mask cracked. Her tears dried faster than they'd fallen. Her smile tightened, and her voice lost its softness. "So what? You're going to let him decide your life? He's just a kid." That was the breaking point. The millionaire looked at his son, then back at her. "No," he said, his voice low but firm. "He's not just a kid. He's the one person I trust to see what I couldn't." It was loyalty, spoken plain. The kind that left no room for negotiation. Her face hardened. She realized it was over not just the relationship, but the image she'd built for herself. No more dinner parties on his arm. No more expensive vacations posted online. No more future as a wife of a man she never truly loved. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice stripped of elegance now, but the door closed behind her before the words could even land. What lingered in that silence wasn't regret. It was relief. The air felt lighter, the walls brighter. For the first time in months, father and son sat together, without the weight of pretense pressing down on them. The millionaire reached across the table, resting his hand on his boy's shoulder. "You saved me from a mistake I didn't want to see," he admitted, and the son, calm, resolute, just shook his head. "No, Dad, you saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you who you are. It wasn't fireworks or shouting matches that ended this chapter. It was choice. A simple, final choice, to value truth over illusion, loyalty over charm, family over fantasy, and that choice made all the difference. Sometimes the loudest truth doesn't come from shouting, it comes from a quiet refusal to accept a lie. Time has a way of smoothing jagged edges. Weeks turned into months, and the storm that once threatened their home became nothing more than a memory. Father and son found themselves closer than ever, sharing late-night conversations, quiet meals, even moments of laughter that had been missing for far too long. The millionaire, a man who had built empires and closed impossible deals, admitted something humbling. He had almost lost it all, not his money, but the only relationship that mattered. He'd been so desperate to fill a void that he'd nearly handed the keys of his life to someone who never cared for the lock, only the gold behind the door. One evening he sat with his son on the back porch, the glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the lawn. He took a slow breath, heavy with both regret and relief. "I thought I was protecting Yubby moving on," he confessed. "But maybe I was just trying to protect myself from being alone." His son didn't rush to answer. He just nodded, steady and wise beyond his years. "You weren't alone, Dad. You had me. You'll always have me." It was a simple truth, but it landed harder than any business lesson ever could. And then there was the other choice. the one that had shattered the illusion completely. When the boy had named someone else as Mom, it hadn't been out of spite. It had been out of love. Whether it was a trusted family friend who had always been there, or simply the honoring of his late mother's legacy, the message was clear. Asterisk motherhood isn't a title. You can claim it's something you earn. Asterisk the millionaire respected that choice. He didn't argue. He didn't try to rewrite it. He honored it. From that day forward, whoever his son had chosen to wear that title held a permanent, respected place in their lives. Family gatherings shifted. The pressure was gone. Laughter came easier, meals tasted warmer, and the air in the house no longer carried the tension of pretending. Friends noticed, too. They said the millionaire looked lighter, as if he'd set down a burden no one could quite name, and maybe he had, because in chasing an image of perfection, he had almost forgotten that love isn't polished. It isn't about flawless appearances or rehearsed smiles. It's about loyalty, about showing up when no one's watching, about standing beside the people you claim to love, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one's clapping. One night, as the two sat watching old home movies, the father whispered almost to himself, "She would have been proud of you." He didn't have to say who. His late wife's presence lingered in every frame, every memory. The son smiled softly, eyes still on the flickering screen. "I just did what she would have wanted," he replied. And in that moment, healing wasn't some abstract concept. It was alive, right there in the room, woven into their words, their silence, their bond. By the time the dust had fully settled, the millionaire knew this chapter wasn't about loss at all. It was about clarity, about rebuilding with stronger foundations, and about realizing that sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones earned in boardrooms or contracts, but in the quiet resilience of family. Perfection isn't about flawless appearances, it's about loyalty, love, and the people who stand by you when no one's watching. The house was finally quiet. Not empty, no, it was alive with something far more valuable than gold or glamour. Laughter, trust, and the simple rhythm of a father and son finally seeing each other clearly. The fiancée was gone, her charm and illusions left behind like an old costume. And in her absence truth had room to breathe. The millionaire had learned something he couldn't have bought, couldn't have negotiated, couldn't have faked. Real strength lies in honesty, loyalty, and the bonds you nurture when no one's watching. Money dazzles, beauty mesmerizes, but they can't replace trust. They can't rewrite the memories of who actually stands by your side. The son had chosen wisely, and in doing so he'd reminded his father what mattered most. As the sun set over their home, the two of them sat together, not as a man trying to fix a life, and a boy trying to survive it, but as a family, grounded in truth. Stories like this remind us why we watch, why we listen, why we care. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. It doesn't need spectacle. It whispers in moments like this, in choices made quietly, but with unwavering courage. If you found this story as cathartic as I did, please hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It takes hours to write these scripts, sift through details, and bring these stories to life, and your support helps us keep doing what we love.